Martin Luther King Jr. was a social activist who protested against the racial discrimination of blacks in America. Martin was born in 1928 in Atlanta. The neighborhood in which he grew up in was a very well-known African American area, and it was subjected to significant discrimination. King later grew up to become a doctor and minister, as well as meeting his future wife, Coretta King, during his studies in college. In 1953, the couple settled in their hometown of Montgomery, Alabama, where King became a pastor. The town in which Martin lived in was one of the most segregated places in all of America, and it was becoming even worse. A young black woman in Alabama named Rosa Parks protested the fact that blacks cannot sit on the front of buses, and was arrested. In response, King led many protests against this segregation. In November 1959, the Supreme Court of America ruled that the segregated seating on buses was unconstitutional. This ruling was heavily influenced by the hard work and determination of Martin Luther King Jr., who became a national figure. This also made him a target for white supremacists, who firebombed his home a few months later. King traveled around the country with other ministers to inspire individuals who were victims of segregation and to stand up for themselves and to protest peacefully. Later that year, King organized a march in Washington to protest discrimination against black civil rights. It was to be a peaceful rally meant to send a message to Washington that all blacks wanted to be treated equally throughout America. It was held on August 28th and was attended by 200,000 to 300,000 people. Martin Luther King Jr.'s most famous moment occurred during this march when he addressed the crowd with one of his most well-known speeches ever, "I Have a Dream." In this speech, King shared his vision and dream that America would rise out of its cruel discrimination and have all people viewed as equal. This made him world-renowned for his work, winning a Nobel Peace Prize. In 1965, after a brutal attack from white supremacists, Congress passed the Voting Rights Act, which guaranteed the right to vote for all African Americans. The passing of this act that gave African Americans the right to vote created a huge rift between young radicals and King. These radicals were white supremacists who were angry with the legal changes that made America more equal to all races. They felt they needed to do something to stay superior to other ethnicities. On the evening of April 4th, 1968, a tragedy occurred as Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. He was fatally shot while standing outside on his balcony in Memphis, where he had traveled to support a sanitation workers' strike. His murder sparked riots throughout America, and President Johnson deemed the day a national day of mourning. King's murderer, James Earl Ray, was a known white supremacist and was sentenced to 99 years in prison for his appalling racism and murder of Martin Luther King Jr. This was a major democratic moment as a white supremacist killed a social activist who fought for equality for all people. With democracy meaning that all people are created equal and have equal rights and an equal voice, I believe King is a hero of democracy for his peaceful efforts to achieve black equality in the United States. This moment in history revealed distorted views that the murderer James Earl Ray had on democracy and his disregard for King's views. James believed in a racist way of living where any person who was not white was looked down upon, and that segregation and discrimination against blacks was acceptable in society. His view on democracy had different levels of superiority, with whites at the pinnacle. I do not believe this view is democratic, as in a democratic society, all people are created equal and have equal rights. I believe King's views on society demonstrated a true democracy, as he felt that all people should have equal rights and equal say, no matter the color of their skin. He also led peaceful protests to spread his message, which revealed his respect for all human life, as he wanted to communicate his views in a non-violent manner. My view of this democratic conflict was that the murder was evil, and what King did to help blacks achieve equality in America was needed and honorable. I completely believe in what Martin Luther King Jr. was fighting for and his attempts to obtain equality for all people, and the way he protested peacefully showed his respect for all people and his love to all. To solve this major conflict, I would have put more protection around King, as his social activism was well known throughout the States, and it was known that white supremacists hated the love King was spreading around the world. They should have inferred that someone would try to harm King and put more protection around him, as it was needed at all times. Another way this conflict could have been avoided was for the American government to ban the possession of guns. This would make murderous weapons inaccessible for lunatics like James Earl Ray, who committed this hate crime. That is the Democratic beliefs and views on the murder of Martin Luther King Jr., what side I believed in during this conflict, and how the conflict should have been avoided in the first place.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed.